This is a hands-on tutorial to get started with the add-on, to get a quick overview of the features and how they work in the context of a real video project. I'm going to run you through this from the start. Now we are in an empty project, so this is my template. First, I'm going to delete the splash screen with the X key. That's something I use in most videos, but don't want it here. And the first step when you make a project with the add-on is to save it somewhere, because you'll need that to import the project. So I'm going to copy the path where I want to save it, where I prepared my audio, image, and video folders for import purposes, and paste the path in Blender. Name the blend file however you'd like. This is a copy of the video I did from BitSummit. The folders next to the blend file are named audio, image, img, and video. They all contain files. So thanks to that, I can go to anywhere in the timeline and press Ctrl-Shift-I to import absolutely everything. It can take a little bit of time if there are lots of video shots. This is the import process in Blender that can take a little while. The advantages of using this is for all the videos that are specific to the project, it's going to import them instantly. It lets you organize your videos and images into subfolders to use as categories if you want, and the script will scan folders one after the other, so the videos are all next to one another, but they are in the order they were found in your project. But not only that, normally if you add the videos with the add menu, it's going to stack them up vertically and not place them one after the other on the timeline. It also places the audio above the videos. I prefer to have the audio below for editing. Now you can see as I make a change and press Ctrl-Z, Blender takes a while to regenerate the waveforms. I don't want these to show up to get recalculated every time. I'm going to press L. L is a basic shortcut to select linked strips with the mouse. It will select all the strips, the block of contiguous strips under the mouse cursor. And you can press Alt-W to toggle the waveforms on and off. If I make another change and I press Ctrl-Z, it's not going to recalculate the waveforms every time. But actually, I don't need the audio from the strips up there, so I'm going to press X to instantly delete them. That's one of the little tweaks in the add-on to help you work faster. So then I want to set my timeline's range so that when I play back, it doesn't jump back to the beginning. So I'll press A to select everything and press Ctrl-Alt-P to set the preview range to the selection. It works with any selection, so you can press B and box select anything, and then Ctrl-Alt-P again to set the preview to that chunk. As you reach the end, you can loop over a section, and the advantage is if you make some cuts, you can then loop over the part you cut. Same thing, it works for the audio or any strip that you select. So if you make a little animation on an image strip, it will also work. For pictures, they are stretched by default. To initialize them and scale them down to the proper size, you want to select them. One thing you have to do is to pass the cursor over them, because Blender doesn't fully load the pictures and it doesn't read all their properties until it has rendered them once on screen. And once you've done that, you can press T to add transformed strips to these pictures, and Blender is going to scale them down. Note there's one limitation with image strips in Blender. It's if the image ratio is opposite to that of your video and the image is bigger, it will get cropped like that. My actual source image, it's vertical here. So if you want to use it in Blender, you have to wrap it into a larger image that will fit the size of your video. When you've imported the video, Blender also sets the frame rate of the project based on the imported video. The add-on will warn you if videos have a different frame rate. This is not completely safe, but in general, Blender really doesn't like to have videos with two different frame rates in the project. And if you try to do that, import them with the add-on and press Ctrl Z, will crash it most likely. We're looking in a more robust solution for the future, but there's no way to do it without external tools like FFmpeg and FFprobe, unfortunately. Okay, so the next part is generating proxies. Proxies are much smaller videos that allow you to get smoother playback, so you use a lower resolution video with an encoding that's much easier to read for Blender. Right now, in the add-on, there's a script to generate them with the FFmpeg program. This allows you to use your computer's full CPU power to compute the proxies faster than Blender. It will also generate smaller proxies than that of Blender, so they will take less disk space, for example, if you are working with a laptop. And another thing is it will generate proxies for image files that are transparent. So if I select these images here, go down to generate proxies in Blender, I'm going to set selected strip at 25% proxies and rebuild proxies and timecodes. You'll see you get this ugly black background and you lose the transparency because Blender will generate them as JPEGs, but with our add-on, you can keep the transparency. So for that, you have to use an external script. You have to navigate to the Power Sequencer folder. Right now, the tool is in the scripts folder. It's called Build FFmpeg Proxies. You'll want to use the command line here to run this Python script. It's a little technical at the moment. We'll make it easier again in future versions of the add-on available from within Blender, but for now, you have to go through this. I'm going to get the path to this folder, go to this folder with the cd change directory command. I'm using Linux Bash, even though I'm on Windows, because it's available on all platforms now. And I'll type Python to call script with Python on my Ubuntu virtual, like it's not virtual, my Ubuntu on Windows, I have to use Python 3, and then build ffmpeg proxies.py, followed by the path of the folder I want to generate proxies from. So I'm going to copy the path to my image folder and to the root image folder, and Blender will generate proxies for all these pictures here. Paste the path and press enter. And there you go, it generates the commands and then starts to generate the pictures themselves. So if I dive in one of the BL proxy folders, this is where Blender normally stores the images. These are not transparent. This one is transparent. You can see it made a transparent image. If I go back to Blender, the images you see here are proxies. So they are fast for playback, but they are transparent and they don't look too bad. I always use 25% proxies by default. Right now, it's kind of hard-coded in the add-on, and this is due to the fact that performances beyond that tend to go down too fast at the moment. So I really recommend working that way, even if it makes for a slightly ugly image. If you want to get a better sense for the look of your edits and for compositing, you will have to render a small bit of the video, so you can press F12 to render one image at a time. Okay, so the next step is often to edit the audio. For a tutorial where you have the audio with the recording, you edit both strips together. But I'm going to wrap my audio in a meta strip, again, a Blender feature, Ctrl G, it's like a group, which you can enter when it's selected and active with the tab key, get inside of it, and this allows you to focus on what's inside that strip. It's a sub-timeline if you want. Some tips from them. The event takes place in Kyoto, once Japan's capital, now... Part of the job is going to be to remove spaces and gaps, and I use claps often while I'm recording to help me at edit time. Often it's when there's something wrong in the text. So it lets me jump to the start of the next chunk on the waveform and remove what's before it. So to remove elements, you can cut and trim with the mouse with Power Sequencer. And there are a few ways to do it. Control left click and drag on the timeline, or control click and control alt right click. So select mouse to trim instantly, not interactively. If you control click and drag, it's the interactive version of the tool that takes precedence. Then you can also use the shift key to not only trim everything, but you can see the arrows showing you that it will remove gaps at the same time. So I can use that to quickly remove parts of the audio. Early in the morning. Okay, so that early in the morning part I've had a few times. So when I want to remove a chunk that I already cut, like that, I'll select it with B, click and drag. This overrides the default select box. It will replace your selection every time because it saves a lot of time. And Shift X to delete and ripple. So it moves everything back after what you had in the timeline. All right, so we have a little chunk edited here. I'm going to remove the rest to not waste too much time and jump to the next part. So Alt-G to ungroup something that was in a meta strip. So you get the edit back inside of your main strips. And then Blender doesn't have 3-point editing, right? The bulk of the job is going to be to take each of the shots to define the order in which you want to have them on the audio. And in this case, I'm talking about Kyoto in the audio. So I want to take my few shots from Kyoto here. So every time I box select with B and I move large chunks at the time. You can also, when you press G, keep the control key down to snap to the various cuts that are around your board. So if you press the control key while your cursor is on the left of your selection, it's going to snap the left side of your selection. And if you place your cursor on the right, it's going to snap the right side of the selection to the cuts you can see right below my strips here. Oh, a big thing I recommend is working with a stylus. If you can see my cursor moving a lot and being a bit jiggly around the screen, it's because I'm working with a Wacom tablet. And this saves a lot of time, regardless of the editing program, because you can quickly place your hand on the screen, fairly precisely select handles on the fly. The add-on adds some tools for that, but it's a lot faster to click, drag, trim than doing it with the mouse. So do that to save a lot of time. So now I have my few shots and I'm only using the video here. So one thing I can do when I want to swap the shot's position, say I have 2 shots of Kodaiji, so I want to remove this one. And then I have a few tools to remove gaps and to swap the various shots around. So first, the concatenate tool. When you select a strip, you can press C to concatenate the next strip after it. It doesn't need to be active, just to be selected. So if you only have one strip selected, you can press C a few times to get the next shots to snap to the end of the currently selected shot. You can also press Shift C. Shift often means all in the add-on to concatenate all the strips in the current channel. So it really concatenates them, by the way. If I leave gaps all around, I can press Shift C, and it's like a remove all gaps, but only in the channel. It also works with a particular selection. So if you have multiple strips selected, you can press C, and it will concatenate the selection only. Then select the last one, press Shift C or C again to get the next strips in the edit. This is useful when you are editing audio, if you make cuts like these to remove space or silences in the audio. You can select the strips you just cut and press C to remove all the spaces without changing the video that's above it. Okay, so now let's edit the shots. Normally I would edit to the audio waveform. As I'm recording this video, it's a little harder. But in general, I'll try to find a section in my video shot where the colors, etc. are fairly uniform or the camera doesn't move too much because I'm limited with the gear I have. So this is interesting. I can trim with the keyboard shortcut Control K. to Smart Trim, or I could use Control Alt right click to remove the left portion a bit more sloppily, which is not too big of a deal when you are working on a YouTube video like that. So I'll leave my shots hanging like that for the time being. I'm going to trim all my shots at first. When you trim, sometimes you'll have the issue that when you use the instant trim, it's going to cut on the side that's the shortest. You can use either the keyboard shortcuts to trim on the right side, in this case, Alt-K, and Control-K on the left side. Another way to do it is to Control-click and drag. The tool snaps to the end of the strip, so you can release and only trim that strip. So you can also Control-click and drag to the right. We'll stop at the next strip. Finally, you can Control-click to just add a cut, select the left part and X to delete it, or select the right part and X to delete it. Here's how it looks at normal speed when I'm working. Kind of trim the fat on the strips and I will refine them at edit time. This is often what happens as well with the 3-point editing workflow. Here it's just a little faster. So once I have all my strips, I select them with the B key, sloppily press C to concatenate them, place my cursor to the left of the selection, G, Control to snap to the start of the timeline, and I click to validate. So now I have a few shots to work with. I went to Bit Summit this year, a large event dedicated to indie game developers, especially those from Japan, and get some tips. Okay, so my shots are not aligned with the audio and I have a problem. I want to bring in another shot from my stock folder that works a little better with the start of the audio. I went to the Bit Summit, so I would need to either show the event's venue, which I didn't shoot, or going there in some way, so walking or something like that. So that's why I keep a video folder where I have videos organized by year. I do the same for photos as well. And I have a Bit Summit folder where I have going to the Bit Summit in the train and also being at the event. So I can choose any video from there. You will see that I organized these videos. They are not inside of the Bit Summit project. I may use them for other videos later. So I'm going to get 2 shots of the train as well. And one issue you'll see with Blender is I can't drag and drop 2 videos at the same time. The only way I know to import multiple strips at the same time is Shift A, add like a movie strip, for example, and then you go to the folder and only then can you import multiple files at the same time. So say I want the view of the fields here, this one as well, and this last shot of the train looked really nice, so let's import that. Okay, so now I have my 3 strips. Okay, so Control G to group them in a meta strip where I can start to trim them because they're a little long. I have a point of interest here, the house that passes in front of the camera. Yeah, so let's cut a little before that and give it some space after that before we pass in front of the second house. So I could delete the 2 strips on the side, or I can put this strip aside somewhere, like move it down 1 channel, trim the second one. We're going to use the cut and paste in the add-on, which also saves you some time. So let's say I want to get the trucks here and maybe stop here for a transition. Okay, so I cut a little too sloppily, and I can see that here. I want the shot to end when the building or the concrete element is still a little bit behind the window. And I want to edit that cut. So normally you would have to click twice to select the handles and move the cut. Instead, one thing I can do is press Shift-Alt-G and it's going to select the cut for me, and keep the Shift key down to move it slowly and align it with my time cursor here. And now the cut is good. So I'm going to move this down, right click and drag to grab it on the fly. Grab these 2 strips, C to concatenate, Control X to cut. And unlike the default cut and paste, when you press Control V, it will be pasted at the cursor. So you can then grab these new strips on the fly, sloppily place them on your previous edits, and release so that they get pushed after the few strips you had. And I want the 2 to come before the previous strip, so I'm going to grab them, align them with the base audio. One thing I can do is try to ripple the edit. It doesn't ripple only in the channel, it's going to push the audio to the right. So you keep the Alt key down to ripple and click, and it pushes everything that's after the strip you have selected, but you can see it can be a little finicky. So instead, just going to place it right here over, press L to select the concatenated or connected strips that are below the ones at the top. G, sloppily place them on top of the first 2 strips and click to have them get pushed after the end of the current strips. This is something I really like about Blender because it doesn't replace, your edits in most video editing programs. If you do something like that, it gets inserted on top of your strip. It's going to replace them. And it's not always what you want. I often want what Blender does instead, to push the strips after the end, because I want to keep the integrity of the shots. And from there, you can start editing with the waveform.